Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Just want to say thank you first of all for everyone that has checked out my previous videos and given me feedback. I really do appreciate it, and if you haven't at all, please go check out previous videos. I really think you would enjoy them if you like this kind of NHL content, and I will be continuing to post pretty consistently. Might not be every day, but I'm going to continue to try my best to post at least every other day as of right now. So, with that being said, just want to thank everyone once again. But obviously, you clicked on the video because you saw that I am talking about the teams most likely to buy come the NHL trade deadline, as we are only a couple weeks away from it happening in February. And with that being said, also, I did revolve this video around buyers hand in hand with their cap space and not so much necessarily, I shouldn't say not so much, but definitely in part with their cap space and in part with their needs. So that is why you'll see throughout this video I do not really touch on teams that are close to the cap threshold and having barely any wiggle room, because I know that how much more of a process it'll be for them to make a move, especially a significant one, trying to get rid of cap relief, whether it be through LTIR or something of that nature, or just getting rid of pretty much a dead contract on the team with a player that really isn't useful anymore, but is still taking up a lot of cap. But I'm not going to touch on those teams, even though obviously there can be plenty that still buy come the deadline. It's just more difficult. So I thought this would be easiest to discuss the ones that have the most cap space, so it makes most sense for them to make moves. So starting it off, the most obvious pick is the Colorado Avalanche. They lead the NHL in regards to cap space currently and have roughly 17 mil to work with. We're talking like 16 mil over 800,000 add on too. So Colorado, by all means, makes perfect sense to be buying big at the deadline. It's just a matter of what. I can definitely see them looking for possibly the best rental forward on the market, whether it be possibly Chris Kreider or Tyler Toffoli. That makes sense. Possibly even another goaltender if they're not as confident with one of Francouz or Grubauer as they continue this run throughout the rest of the season going into playoffs. And possibly even some added depth on defense. So there's a lot of things that Colorado can do, but I fully expect them to be buying come the trade deadline, given the amount of cap space they have and whatever holes they have in their lineup, whether it be due to injury or just lack of consistency with certain players. It ultimately makes sense for them to be going all in. And second, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. They have 15 mil roughly that they can work with. And Columbus makes a lot of sense, but it really also narrows down to, and I talked about them in my last video. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It all makes sense in hand where they will be sitting come closer to the deadline. If they are still in a playoff spot by then or right around it, then I would say it would make sense for them to be buying. They have all this cap space from losing all their top players essentially from throughout this past off season. But if they can do that, then I definitely see good things happening if they make the moves. They definitely need offensive help. That's no question. They have one of the worst offenses in the league. They need a guy like a Chris Kreider too, or a Tyler Toffoli, etc. Someone they can throw in their top six to give them reliable scoring and help them. A guy that has playoff experience too. So those definitely stand out to me. Their defense is perfectly fine, so I wouldn't worry about that. And the goaltending, as obviously it would be holding up if they are still in a playoff position come the trade deadline. So scoring depth is huge for them, so I could definitely see them buying. But if they are out of a playoff spot significantly by, say, 5 or more points come the deadline, then if I were them, I would definitely consider selling at the deadline, getting rid of some assets that won't necessarily be part of their future. Gustav Nyquist comes to mind in my opinion. But I understand Columbus wants to win now, and rightfully so. So if they are in a playoff spot by then, don't be surprised to see them going all in and try to buy once again. Just also don't know how much they can give up, given the fact that they lost so many assets at last season's trade deadline, acquiring guys like Duchesne and Dzingel. They gave up a decent amount of picks and prospects So how deep are they in that category? I'm not sure. So that's something to consider as well. But expect Columbus to be buying if they are in a playoff spot. Next, the New York Islanders. Isles makes perfect sense too. They have roughly 14 mil that they can work with, and also I forgot to say too. Going back to Colorado, they're currently second in the Atlantic Division, so they're sitting good. Columbus has the first wild card spot currently in the Eastern Conference, but that could be subject to change by the time I post this video. Same with the Islanders are currently third in the Metro. That could change too. I'm not sure. But overall, the Islanders make perfect sense because they also really need some all around help, in my opinion. If they could add some depth on defense, given the fact that they've been dealing with some injuries, I think they will do it. Same thing with some bottom six scoring, especially. They have the cap space to do it, so expect the Isles to be making maybe nothing too major, but just a lot of holes to fill throughout their lineup that will be crucial to their success going forward. So after the Islanders, I have the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets are a very interesting team too. They have 10 mil and a little bit over 600,000 to work with, and they are currently sitting 3 points out in the second wildcard spot, but that can be subject to change by the time I post this video as well. But Winnipeg, in my opinion, is right in pace to possibly make playoffs, looming, but they need help defensively, greatly, given the amount of defensemen they lost in this past year's offseason. Their scoring is there without question, but could they use a guy in the bottom six? Sure. Could they use help on defense? Absolutely. A backup goaltender would be nice as well. That is something that is yet to be seen. But I fully expect them to be another team that is buying come the deadline, unless they are really out of a playoff spot, which I don't see that happening. They are in a team now which is perfectly in a win-now stage with this core group that they have in their offense. Still a very young offensive team. Defense does need help, though. If they can get a shutdown defenseman possibly to throw in their top two defensive lines, then that would drastically help them. So expect Winnipeg to be buying come the deadline as well. And this is where I kind of get tricky. Now I have the option to talk about Montreal, Tampa, and the Nashville Predators. And two of those three teams I could definitely see buying, even if it's not too significant. The other I'm not sure. Montreal is the one I'm not sure about. They have around 10 mil or so to work with, but they are currently 8 points out of the second wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. And I just don't see why Montreal would continue to buy if they are in that same kind of spot come the deadline. If they are closer, then maybe. But I don't see this current group with Montreal, even if they go out and make the best move they possibly can. I don't see that being enough for them to have a deep playoff run, even if they make the playoffs. I just see too much glaring holes in this lineup, and I think that they need to really continue to retool, not rebuild, but continue to retool this team and put out the best team possible, not just a lot of guys that are fillers, because I see that with this current Montreal team. They have a great prospect pool, so I expect a lot of great things from them going forward. But right now, I just don't see with their current core group and some injuries that they've been dealing with that would ultimately be enough for them, even if they are buying at the deadline, to have anything significant happen. So Montreal, I really don't know what to say. That all depends on where they're sitting come the deadline, but in my opinion, I think it would be best for them not to buy, and if anything, to sell with some expiring contracts that they have. It would just make most sense, and they would get a decent haul out of them, because there are some decent players on that Montreal team that won't be with Montreal within the next season or two. So, but when it comes to Tampa, Tampa makes sense. They have 7 mil or so to work with. They are currently second in the Atlantic, so they have been fantastic overall. Really throughout the past month, they have really played great hockey. One of the best, if not the best, team in the NHL currently. Tampa, I could see making minor moves. It would make sense for them maybe to add some depth on that right side of their defense, because that right side does worry me. I don't think there's enough experience there, and I don't know if that would be a struggle or not come playoff time. Goaltending, you can leave it. McElhenney hasn't been anything fantastic, but they can handle it. They are a deep enough team. Offensively, they can maybe use another bottom six winger here or there. Just kind of just filling the holes like any other contending team would, given the fact that they do have the cap and that they do take on rentals and they are in full expectation of probably not re-signing them after the season. So it would just make sense as long as a guy isn't too costly. Just more depth, I think, would be best for Tampa. So don't be surprised if they make some minor moves come the deadline. I wouldn't expect anything drastic because their core group is very solid to begin with. So yeah, just be on the lookout. I can see Tampa making some moves. And to cap off this video, obviously these aren't necessarily the only teams that will be going for buying at the deadline, but these were just ones based off cap, like I said. So finishing off with the Nashville Predators, Nashville needs to make moves. I know they want to and they need to. This season is not done. I'm not going to sit here and believe that is done because I don't think it is for their sake. They need to make moves. They are currently 6 points out of the second wildcard spot in the Western Conference. That really isn't far out. They have enough good players on this team to make it happen. The goaltending needs to get better. The defense needs to get better. That needs to be addressed along with offense. They need depth in their offense too. They've had players been underperforming this year. They have roughly $7 million to work with, a little less than that. And they should really make things happen. If they can go out and possibly get a Chris Kreider, a Tyler Toffoli, or anyone else to throw in their top 9 forward group, I say go for it. And the reason being is because they haven't had guys performing well. Talked about it in the Predators video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Especially a guy like Mikael Granlund stands out to me like really underperforming. Throwing a guy like Kreider or Toffoli in there, that ultimately changes the game for them. And defensively, if they can bring in a fifth or sixth defenseman to really fill the spot, because Dan Hamhuis has not been playing well. Dante Fabro has been up and down given the fact that he is a very young defenseman, and Yannick Weber isn't anything special in my opinion. So those holes are pretty glaring, and they definitely need to be addressed. Their defense probably more than anything. So if that can be addressed and a solid forward in the top 9, then I think they're rolling. I think they have the team to make it happen. They are in win now stage, and if I'm David Poile, you have to jump on this. This is a win now team. They have the prospects and the picks to risk, give up, and still contend years in the future. As long as Poile is GM, he will continue to do great when it comes to drafting, and he's one of the best GMs in the league in my opinion. He was so great with drafting players in the later rounds too. Just hidden gems. A guy that really speaks out to me is Victor Arvidsson in particular. But they just have a lot. They have the right management. Not sure how I feel with John Hines as the coach, but I don't think that is necessarily too much of a setback for them. But overall, this Nashville team needs to make playoffs. They need to make a strong push, and they need to go big come the trade deadline. If they are still sitting out of a playoff spot or just barely in, this defense needs to get addressed, and the goaltending needs to get its act together. And overall, the offense needs to click on a nightly basis. Because the offense really has been the problem, but at the same time, they have had their stretches of really underperforming throughout the entire lineup, not just the offense itself. So that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with me. Maybe some teams I didn't talk about. Like I said, I wouldn't be touching all that can possibly be buying, just ones that make most sense given salary cap reasons. But yeah, once again, thank you all. If you haven't subscribed, please do like all that great stuff. And if I'm not back tomorrow, then I will definitely be back the following day. So thanks so much.